I'm going to share with you now information that challenges the government and major industries' position on genetically modified foods. This article, which is currently posted online, is called GMOs, The Lie That Won't Go Away, by scholar in residence Richard Gale and myself, and published in its entirety on Progressive Radio Network. Recent news on the GMO front includes a harsh warning to consumers who purchase genetically engineered foods and products containing GMOs. The ruling by a San Francisco court in favor of Dwayne Johnson, a groundkeeper with cancer, against Monsanto, has set a precedent for cases against the agrochemical industry. In effect, the jury's ruling means that Monsanto's Roundup herbicide, glyphosate, is now legally recognized as a health hazard and a carcinogen. Here's the problem. I'll bet everyone in this audience has traces of this in their blood. Approximately 8,000 other victims of Monsanto's Roundup are now lining up to sue the biotech firm, now owned by the German agrochemical company Bayer, but actually spelled Bayer. I'll bet many of you have been pronounced it Bayer aspirin, but it's not Bayer, it's Bayer aspirin. Now, in the last day, a judge, federal judge, agreed to uphold the verdict, but brought the amount down to, I think it was $76 million. Bayer's stock tanked because Bayer bought Monsanto for, I think it was around $63 to $67 billion. And imagine now the stock lost over $63 billion in value. It's tanking. And yet they have a minimum of 8,000 lawsuits and probably triple that amount with other law firms getting involved in class action lawsuits. So we may see, it is entirely possible to see the bankruptcy of Monsanto and Bayer. Although this is great news for consumers, the Trump administration is deaf, blind, and dumb. Well, that's just him alone, but his entire administration know nothing about the truth of GMOs and their environmental hazards and severe health risks, and they have been aggressively promoting the dumping of more toxins on Americans. In April of 2017, President Trump signed an executive order to eliminate, quote, unnecessary regulations that would hinder the economic growth of the largest agrochemical corporations. This means a faster approval process for new biotech crops and pesticides. Trump has surrounded himself not only with Wall Street stooges, but with shills for the agricultural industry. He has met privately with the heads of Bayer and Monsanto, but Trump and his GOP minions are not content with advancing Bayer and Monsanto's interests in the United States. During a Congressional House Science Committee last February, the GOP took up the industry's cause and threatened to cut off funding to the World Health Organization for labeling Monsanto's glyphosate as a carcinogen. What the majority of our legislators repeatedly ignore and deny is the hard science behind GMO's myth. And by the way, it was Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, George Bush Sr., but it all started with George Bush Sr., who gave the green light to GMOs. And every president since then has supported GMOs. And it was Obama who, working with Michael Taylor, former top person at Monsanto, now top person at the FDA, who gave the passage of the Dark Act, which protects Monsanto. So the original foundation of agricultural biotechnology was to advance sales of pesticides by engineering crops to become immune to toxic spraying. And while weeds and insect pests could be eradicated, targeted crops would be spared, thereby allowing farmers to spray massive amounts of toxic chemicals on soy, corn, cotton, sugar beets, and other agricultural foods without injury. This was the assumption that led to the agrogenetic revolution. Only during the past decade, with more and more GM products in our diets and more farm acreage being sprayed with glyphosate and other toxic pesticides and herbicides, are the real long-term health effects to animals and humans and the environment becoming more fully recognized within the scientific community. The extent of pesticide runoff into rivers and streams and reservoirs means humans are now being exposed to life-threatening chemicals every hour of the day. It was never the mission of Monsanto and the cartel of agrochemical seed companies to increase yields and produce drought-resistant crops. That was a ruse. The evidence of higher GM crop yields was an afterthought. However, data from independent research now confirms that the years of higher GM yields are short-lived and drop dramatically thereafter, leaving far below yields from traditional organic farming methods. In a major scientific paper published by Earth Open Source called GMO Myths and Truths, an evidence-based examination of the claims made by the safety and the efficacy of genetically modified crops, King's College molecular geneticist Professor Michael Antonio, molecular biologist John Fagan, and GM Watch's Claire Robinson outline the known health risks associated with glyphosate. They are, listen carefully, DNA damage, premature births and miscarriages, birth defects including neural tube defects, and also absent parts of the brain and skull, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, disruption of the neurobehavioral development in children, including attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, since the release of the study in the journal Entropy, a researcher at MIT and a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists has discovered that glyphosate is in fact taken up by plants from the soil and found in our food, an accusation Bayer and Monsanto continues to deny. The study reports that the negative impact of glyphosate accumulation, quote, is insidious and manifests slowly over time as inflammation damages cellular systems throughout our body, end quote. In addition to links with problems ranging from cancer to infertility, a connection may also be made to the rising number of adults acquiring Parkinson's disease. A couple of earlier studies on individual cases found correspondence between glyphosate exposure and the onset of Parkinson's. There are now growing concerns that glyphosate consumed by mothers and infants in genetically modified tainted foods might be contributing to the autism epidemic that continues to worsen every year and now affects 1 in 50 children. And with each passing year, the body of scientific data challenging the safety of glyphosate expands. In several peer-reviewed studies that we examined in detail and conducted by researchers Andreas Carseco at the University of Buenos Aires, glyphosate was observed to cause teratogenic impairment of neural signaling and microencephaly, leading to a cardiofacial malformations in the cranium. In early 2014, the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health published a study linking glyphosate runoff in Sri Lanka's water systems to an epidemic rise in fatal, unknown chronic kidney disease. And until recently, scientists were unable to find evidence of what was causing this new illness. Similar observations have been made in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, where more men die of this, what is called CKD, which is chronic kidney disease, than AIDS and diabetes and leukemia. However, in each regional population studied, Roundup, the pesticide, is rampant in its usage. Sri Lankan scientists hypothesized that glyphosate, originally discovered to act as a chelating chemical in 1964, takes up toxic heavy metals and binds them in the kidney without the body's detection. According to the researchers, the buildup of these heavy metals in the kidney ultimately leads to kidney failure and kidney death. In early 2014, the Ministry of Health in Cordoba, Argentina, noted a dramatic rise in deaths from cancerous tumors, twice the national average. It just so happens that the elevated cancer rates of malignancies were being reported in only those regions where genetically modified crops and toxic agrochemicals like Roundup are most widely used. GMO's health risks to animals and humans are also being reported more frequently in the scientific literature. And corporate agro studies claiming GMOs are safe generally rely upon a research methodology that supplies a variety of so-called reference diets to the animals under investigation. These convoluted studies are designed intentionally to produce an abundance of data without any standard reference control group. This enables corporate scientists to conflate and distort results. This common industry practice was exposed by Claire Robinson at GM Watch regarding a published DuPont study on the safety of its Roundup Ready canola. Robinson pointed out that, quote, poor experimental design is intentionally utilized to cover up toxic effects. Dr. Eric Seralini at the University of Caen identified changes in gene expression in sperm cells capable of altering androgen and estrogen sex hormones. The study suggests that glyphosate may be altering the human reproduction system. The rate of male infertility in the United States has been dropping steadily since GMO foods started to saturate the average American's diet. The most recent figures published by the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai indicates the average sperm count in men has decreased as much as 60%. And Dr. Seralini's earlier paper revealed a correlation between severe kidney and liver damage, advanced tumors, and premature death in rats fed Monsanto's NK603 maize. His paper has undergone more scientific review and scrutiny than any other study, either proving or disproving GMO safety. And with its republication, the paper should officially replace Monsanto's flawed safety study alleging the health safety of its NK603 corn. Seralini's most recent study showed glyphosate adversely alters the gut microbiome in rats. A proliferation of pathogenic bacteria and a decrease in healthy bacteria were observed. Bayer Monsanto must rely on a veil of secrecy, claiming this is needed to protect its proprietary information in order to avoid revealing to the public its actual GMO safety data. And lacking credible science to engage in an honest debate with the scientific community opposing GMO proliferation, the company must resort to the lowest and most vicious tactics, attacking the integrity of scientists, launching smear campaigns against GMO labeling advocates and organic farmers, and cyber attacks on anti-GMO organizations, and threats of lawsuits against state governments and media outlets advocating or even suggesting mandatory labeling are becoming more frequent. Now, I'm going to stop here. You can read the rest of the article by going to our website, and it's probably double what I've just shared. It's fully footnoted. It has been fully vetted for accuracy and by our team of attorneys. And read it and share it. Share it everywhere you can. This information needs to get out because the average American is not buying organic. They're buying GMO foods, and they should know the health consequences to them and their families